Chapter 1, in which the narrator falls in love, and a dubious sound interrupts one of dear Uncle Napoleon's war stories. One hot summer day, to be precise, one Friday the 13th of August, at about 2:45 in the afternoon, I fell in love. The bitterness and longing I've been through since have often made me wonder whether if it had been the 12th or 14th of August, things would have turned out differently. That day, as on every day, they had compelled us, meaning me and my sister, by force and threats and a few golden promises for the evening, to go into the cellar in order to sleep. In the savage heat of Tehran, an afternoon siesta was compulsory for all the children. But on that day, as on every other afternoon, we were just waiting for my father to fall asleep so that we could go into the yard to play. When my father's snores became audible, I stuck my head out from under the coverlet and glanced at the clock on the wall. It was 2:30 in the afternoon. In waiting for my father to go off, my poor little sister had fallen asleep herself. I'd no choice but to leave her, and I tiptoed out alone. Layli, my uncle's daughter, and her little brother had been waiting in the main garden for us for half an hour. Our two houses had been built within one big enclosure, and there was no wall between them. As on every day, we settled down quietly to our games and conversation in the shade of a big walnut tree. And then I happened to catch Layli's eye. A pair of wide black eyes looked back at me. I couldn't tear my gaze away from hers. I've no idea how long we'd been staring at each other when suddenly my mother appeared standing over us with a little multi-thonged whip in her hand. Layli and her brother ran off to their house, and my mother drove me into the cellar and under the coverlet, threatening me as she did so. Before my head was completely hidden under the coverlet, I looked across at the clock on the wall. It was 2:50 in the afternoon. Before she in turn put her head under the coverlet, my mother said, "Thank God your uncle didn't wake up, because if he had, he'd have torn you all to pieces." My mother was right. Dear uncle, as we called him, was very particular about the orders he gave. He'd given an order that before 5 o'clock in the afternoon, the children weren't so much as to breathe. Within the four walls of that garden, it wasn't only we children who had learned what not sleeping in the afternoon and making a noise during dear uncle's siesta meant. The crows and pigeons appeared in the garden much less often because dear uncle had taken a hunting rifle to them a few times and effected a general slaughter. The street vendors of our area didn't go through our street, which was named after dear uncle, till 5 o'clock, because 3 or 4 times the man who came by on his donkey selling melons and onions had been slapped by dear uncle. But that day my brain was working overtime, and the name of dear uncle didn't put me in mind of his rages and bad temper. I couldn't get free of the memory of Layli's eyes and of her gaze, even for a moment. And no matter how much I tossed and turned, and how much I tried to think of something else, I saw her black eyes, brighter than if she were really there in front of me. That night, underneath the mosquito net, Layli's eyes came after me once more. I hadn't seen her again that evening, but her eyes and her beguiling gaze were there. I don't know how much time passed. Suddenly a weird thought seized my whole brain. God forbid, I've fallen in love with Layli.